I was still wearing my funeral tie when my son suggested I move out. The day my son told me to leave my own house, I was still wearing the black tie I'd knotted for Alina's funeral. Marcus stood in the doorway of the kitchen where his mother had made Sunday pancakes for 31 years, with his arms crossed and his jaw set in a way that reminded me of my father. Hard, certain, already decided. "Dad," he said, and even that single word carried an edge, "I think it's time we talked about the house." I was 63 years old. My wife of 34 years had been in the ground for exactly 6 hours. I had a half-eaten plate of funeral casserole in front of me and a glass of whiskey I hadn't touched, and my son wanted to talk about real estate. "We can discuss it later," I said. "I think now is actually better." He pulled out a chair and sat across from me like a man preparing to negotiate a contract. "Diane and I have been talking. This place is too big for one person. We could convert the guest suite downstairs, turn it into something for you, or there's that retirement community off Maple, the one with the walking trails." "Marcus, Dad, just listen. Your mother's perfume is still on the pillow upstairs." My voice didn't break. I was surprised. "Give me a week before you start measuring rooms." He had the decency to look uncomfortable, but only barely. I left 3 days later, not because Marcus asked again, he didn't have to. The atmosphere in that house had changed into something I couldn't breathe inside. Diane moved through the hallways with a measuring tape she pretended was for curtains. Marcus started arriving in the mornings before I was even dressed, talking to contractors on his cell phone in the driveway. I packed 2 bags, drove 4 hours north to Alina's family cabin on Lake Renner, and told no one exactly where I was going. The cabin hadn't been opened since Alina's diagnosis 18 months ago. It smelled of cedar and old summers. I built a fire that first night, sat in front of it, and felt, for the first time since the hospital, that I could fall apart in peace. I cried until there was nothing left to cry with. Then I slept for 11 hours. In the morning, I started cleaning. The attic above the cabin's back bedroom had always been Alina's domain. She'd inherited the property from her grandmother and treated it the way some people treat journals, privately, tenderly, never quite sharing the whole of it. I'd been up there perhaps twice in 30 years. Storage, she always said, just old things. The trapdoor stuck. I had to use a broomstick to push it open, and when I pulled down the folding ladder and climbed into the low-ceilinged space, the smell hit me first. Lavender and dust, and something older underneath, like the ghost of a season I couldn't name. The boxes were stacked neatly along the far wall, her handwriting on the labels, winter quilts, grandmother's dishes, books, donate, and at the very back, wedged between a broken floor lamp and a box of children's games, a cardboard box with no label at all, just a piece of masking tape across the top, sealed with what looked like wax. Inside were 32 letters. They were bundled with kitchen twine, organized by date. The earliest was postmarked 41 years ago, 2 years before Alina and I had even met. The latest was dated 8 months before her death, all of them addressed to the same name in Alina's handwriting. Thomas Hale. I didn't know any Thomas Hale. I brought the box downstairs and sat with it at the kitchen table for a long time before I opened the first letter. There's a particular kind of dread that comes not from expecting something terrible, but from knowing that whatever you find will permanently change the map of your life. That's what I felt, like standing on a shore, watching a wave I couldn't outrun. The first letter was from 1981. Alina's voice was younger in it, brighter, more reckless than the woman I'd married. She wrote about a summer, about painting the porch of a house in Vermont, about a boy who had gone away to work on a fishing boat in Alaska and promised to come back. Thomas Hale had not come back, or rather, he had come back changed, married to someone else, apologetic, full of excuses that Alina had apparently neither accepted nor forgotten. Letter after letter told the story in fragments. She wasn't writing to him. I understood that slowly, the way you understand something that rearranges everything once it's clear. These were letters she'd written but never sent, a private conversation with a ghost. She wrote to him about marrying me, I married a good man, Thomas, the kind of steady good that I think you and I would have burned through each other too fast to ever become, and about having Marcus, and about the years of a life that was real and whole and genuinely happy. She was clear about that, unambiguous. I want you to know that I am not writing because I am unhappy. I write because you were the first story I ever told myself about who I might become. And I suppose everyone keeps a conversation going with the person who taught them their own shape. I sat at that kitchen table for 6 hours. I read every letter twice. By the time I finished, the light outside had gone from gold to grey to the deep blue of early evening, and I understood several things at once. Elena had loved me. I knew this the way I knew my own heartbeat, not as a belief, but as a fact that existed below the level of argument. The letters weren't a confession of longing. They were a woman processing the architecture of her own life, examining the roads not taken with clear eyes and returning always to where she actually stood. But there was something else in those letters, something about Marcus. In the letter from 1989, the year Marcus turned 4, Elena wrote, "He is so like you in certain ways that it startles me sometimes. The way he crosses his arms, the way he decides something and closes the door on doubt completely. I don't know what that means. I think it means only that we carry the people who shaped us in the bones of how we move through the world, and somehow Marcus caught an echo of you through me without ever meeting you. Children are strange mirrors." She was saying nothing more than that. I read it 5 times to be certain. But then I thought about Marcus in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, already decided, closing the door on doubt completely. I thought about how grief turns people into the worst versions of patterns they inherited without knowing it. And I understood something I hadn't been able to reach inside myself since Elena died. My son wasn't trying to erase me. He was terrified. He'd lost his mother, and now he was staring at a father who might disappear too, into silence, into a house too large, into all the ways men of my generation quietly vanished when they had no one to anchor them. He was doing the only thing he knew how to do. He was being decisive. He was taking action before loss could act first. It was clumsy. It was painful. It was exactly what Elena would have seen through in 30 seconds and handled with a gentleness neither Marcus nor I possessed on our own. I called him that night. He answered on the second ring, and I could hear the guilt already in his hello, the particular acoustic texture of someone who has been waiting for a consequence. "I found something of your mother's," I said. "I'm at the cabin. I want you to come up this weekend, just the 2 of us. No Diane, no contractors, no plans." Silence. Then, "Dad, I'm sorry about." "I know," I said. "Come anyway." He drove up Saturday morning. We sat on the porch with coffee, and I handed him the letters one by one, reading the parts aloud that I thought he needed to hear. We didn't solve everything that weekend. Grief isn't a problem with a solution, it's a landscape you learn to live in. But we talked, genuinely talked, for the first time since his mother's diagnosis. About her, about what she'd meant to each of us. About how 2 people who loved the same woman could still manage to wound each other because they were both drowning. Marcus cried. I let him. I didn't look away. We drove back home together on Sunday. The house was still too large, and the future was still uncertain, and neither of us was particularly good at this. But we walked in through the front door side by side, and that was enough for one weekend. Sometimes that's all love asks for, just to walk back in.